Okay, welcome everyone to Climate Action Week. We're so glad to see all of you here today. We're just going to start with a short video that was filmed at the COP28 in Dubai last year by one of the Regen Sydney core team member, Pete, and it's just going to ground us into the topic of food and climate. Sorry, take.
Do you want me to fill in for 1 second?
Just putting the hotspot here.
Just while we're sorting the tech issues, I just wanted to officially welcome everyone to Pocket City Farms. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Huge shout out to the volunteers who were out on the farm helping us out. Give them a huge round of applause. Thank you so much. And a very special shout, is it ready? Can I just stop filling?
You can continue to
A very special shout out just quickly to Samantha and Sarah, who we had 2 staff off today and they jumped in with no notice and helped run the volley session. So
Thank you. Let's see if that works.
I'm just enjoying this moment because I did promise many of you over the last few years that we would bring agriculture and food system to center stage at COP28, and here we are. I am pleased to announce, drum rolling, that the COP28 UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action has so far received 134 endorsements.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's what it feels like for everybody to be inside the Emirates Declaration. We are in, and it's governments that are in, it's everybody else that's in, and right at the center of this work are farmers.
We are watching disaster. We are seeing that they go the opposite way of nature. So now we need to change to have healthy food, healthy people working with and for nature.
There is hope fast because before there was no voice for change, there was no voice for farmers. But we had an opportunity to present the voices of farmers. So to me, that is a plus. And a challenge is to embrace agroecology for climate action.
Australian farmers are progressive, they're innovative, they're data-driven. So I think if farmers are going to make changes, Australian farmers are in the box seat, but there has to be value in what we're producing, there has to be value in what we're conserving, but there's a lot of opportunities for agriculture.
Food is part of culture, it's part of who we are. So how we look at agriculture, our food systems, feeding the world and restoring landscape health is really critical to how we move forward, increasing agricultural productivity while really ensuring that we have nature-positive, carbon-neutral agriculture.
30% of the problem in terms of causing climate change, but also 30% of the solution is our food and land use systems. If we turn that around into a more regenerative system, the cost that we are currently incurring of our broken food system is about $12 trillion. The benefit we can get by moving to a regenerative system, by all means possible, is about $4 trillion. This is probably the biggest economic opportunity that we have in this century, and frankly, absolutely needed to achieve our climate goals.
The so what of the Emirate Declaration, there's a lot of dimensions to it. It should mean that as countries are preparing their national determined contributions, that they will put a stronger focus on food systems. But at the same time, if the issues in the declaration are important enough to be signed today, they're definitely important enough to become a part of the policy practices as soon as possible.
I am extremely pleased that this COP did not only create momentum for food systems, but successfully mobilize action from non-state actors all around the world.
The world is not in a good place right now, but I think we have such a powerful thing in our hands today. Let's take food systems transformation to the next level. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Pete, for sharing this video with us. Yeah, we'll pass over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Before we get started, even though we have just started, I wanted to just acknowledge the Gadigal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet tonight, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are here today. First Nations people maintained vast areas of land across this country with systems of what we now call regenerative agriculture for thousands of years prior to colonisation, and these systems were really carefully planned and really ingenious, and they're land management principles and practices that we hope this country will one day see again. We like to, once we've done an acknowledgement of country at Pocket City Farms, talk about what we're actively doing next in the reconciliation space. And I'm really excited because actually today, over in the very back corner where there was a sort of disused kids garden that was kind of like these weird logs where you could reach your hand in and get bitten by a redback. That space is now being transformed into an Indigenous cultural garden with tool-making plants, medicinal plants and food plants. And we're not building that because we don't have any Indigenous people on staff currently. So we've partnered with a beautiful mob called Deadly Ed, and they're installing that garden at the moment. You can check it out at the end of the night. A beautiful mural's gone up today, and there's a chalkboard for kids to start using. So we're really excited to see that space come to light, and we'll be launching that officially at our Winter Solstice Festival, which is on Saturday the 22nd of June, and we'd love you all to come along. It'll be from 12 p.m, and you can jump online and grab tickets already on our website.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to all for being here so much as well. And huge thanks to Regen Sydney for partnering with Pocket City Farms on this event. We didn't really do anything, so we're really thrilled to see this many people turn up. And we were really thrilled to have all the help out on the farm, as I said earlier.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I said welcome to Climate Action Week. So Climate Action Week is a dynamic week-long initiative of climate events all around Sydney. And so the goal of Climate Action Week is to create momentum around climate action and focus on what we can do rather than focusing on what we could have done. So as part of that, Regen Sydney thought that we would bring to the conversation a topic that is often not really well mentioned or discussed, which is food system. It's both part of the climate crisis, but also part of the climate solution. And we wanted to create a space for connection, inspiration, and collaboration on that topic. So we are focusing on the goal 2, 4, and 5 mostly tonight, but we really think that this topic is connected to all of the dimensions of the Climate Action Week project. So through tonight, we're hoping that we can create some momentum around what could a regenerative food system look like in Sydney? What does it taste like? Who wants to get involved? Like, we all play a part in that. And through the panel, we're hoping that we can inspire you to see all of the actions that are already happening in Sydney and could just get bigger if we get all people on board. I'm just going to have Maria to give us a bit of a grounding before we get introducing the panel.
Thank you, Milen. Thank you also, Jacqui, and everyone who's here tonight. This is very close to my heart, and so some words came to me. I wrote a few words called Earth Calls. We are all standing on soil. In fact, our planet is called Earth. Yet soil is the most overlooked element in our current existence. Without Earth, we have no means by which to live. Yet peer-reviewed science continues to say, it's okay to apply chemicals to our soil, to our food, to our bodies, to our waterways, to the air that we breathe. What does your heart say? Do you remember how to hear? Earth's rhythm beats, holding the original songs of how we came to be. Rock, water, lichen, air. From sunshine's glow, our green planet grows. Let's wake up our hearts to hear the voice of our mother. Let's give our soil life. If we have hope for each other. Woo.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. And yeah, Maria has been, like, we met a few months ago, and like when we met the first time, we said, let's do something together next year and organize something like that. So when I reached out a few weeks ago, she jumped on board and helped Kieran and I to put this together. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you to all our panelist members who accepted our wide invitation as well only a few weeks ago to be part of this event. They are amazing food weavers, and yeah, I'm sure you're gonna get inspired by what they do. So first we're gonna hear about Dr. Sabrina Chakori, who is a researcher, an educator, and a multi-award social entrepreneur who is committed to building a socially just and ecologically sustainable society. So you work at CSIRO, you explore the dynamics of post-growth food system transition, and you also funded the Brisbane Tool Library and the Degrowth Journal. So quite a busy life. We're gonna hear from Murat as well, who is the heart and the brain behind Ooooby, which we're gonna discover today if you don't know about it yet. We have Jacqui, who is the CEO of Pocket City Farm, which most of you have enjoyed today. And if you're new to the farm, there is a lot of events happening for you to get engaged. We have David Sivyer, which I'm glad we can finally meet in person. David is the CEO of Feedback Organic Recovery, and he managed to meet his experience in the hospitality sector with his passion for farming. And he's going to present us what he's doing now in Sydney after a successful start in Newcastle. And then we have Madison, who is from Young Farmer Connect, and she's the communication and project officer on top of your job at the New South Wales government, I think. So yeah, she will present us what this network could provide us, could provide to young farmers. So yeah, oh sorry, I should have put these slides. That'd be better. Beautiful slides as well, and beautiful photos. So yeah, let's get started. I'll let you walk us through. You may have to tell me what. Oh, I can do it. You can. I'm just gonna move it. Yes. Hi everyone. Thanks for the invite. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I came from Canberra for this event, and it's always nice to see all this pocket of, experimentation. So yeah, I'm Sabrina. I'm working at CSIRO, and today we'll give you an overview, a little bit of what I'm working on, but it's particularly of interest to this event because I do work with organizations that actually act in the same space as many of you. I usually like to start with this slide, with this question: how can we create unsustainable societies? Polluting water, yeah. Polluting air, yeah. Creating inequalities, yeah. Keeping hunger or increasing hunger based on FAO reports, yes. But also creating other health diseases like obesity, and yes, we're on track with that. Plastic pollution from food packaging, yeah. So unfortunately, if this was our to-do list, well, we would think that we are really on track on it, right? And it's pretty scary. And well, if you're here tonight, I might not need to re-explain why we're here, right? There's another updated paper that came out at the end of last year on the planetary boundaries. Short message: we need to do something, and we need to do it quickly. And that something is probably leaning more towards systemic change than a small fix to the system. And so if we look then at, which kind of sustainability transitions we could undertake, and how can we frame them, and so on. I like this spectrum by Morrison and colleagues that looks at sustainability transition from the palliative end, where palliative solutions are defined as technological improvement. They relate to these eco-modernist ideas that more technological advancement gonna somehow offset the social and ecological degradation that we're facing. but we know that relative decoupling is not happening. So relative decoupling means continuing the expansion, economic growth, the expansion of the economy, and somehow offsetting it with technological efficiency. There are no proof that that's happening. So Morrison and colleagues are suggesting to look more towards the other end, the deep radical, deep transition, and they're calling for an exploration of systems that overturn the capitalist, exploitative, and extractivist systems. And they suggest to look at post-growth and degrowth policies. What is degrowth or post-growth? I will use these terms interchangeably today. Basically, the post-growth literature comes from, the idea that already in the 70s we had the first publication. We have limits to growth. Our economy can't expand forever on a planet that has limited resources and natural cycles that need to be respected. And so degrowth is calling for a planned downscaling of production and consumption so that we can also redistribute the gains and the abundance that the planet provides. The literature is vast. I put there some academic papers as well as many other books. Let me just point out that the degrowth literature starts from global north scholars. So basically global north countries that they use their fair share of resources, that continue to use the highest per capita resource consumption in the world, and within global north countries the richest people are responsible for resource consumption. So post-growth literature points out that the responsibility of global north countries. So I've been working for the last year with 3 case studies. Surely many of you interact with them. I won't identify them today, but they all work in different parts of the so-called supply chain. If we look at supply chain in a very simplistic and linear way, one case study focuses on rebuying land and creating communities and cooperatives on the land and practicing what they call agroecological agriculture. Another one started as an open source technology provider to connect producers and consumers, but they do many other things. And the other one that has been around for more than 30 years is a food cooperative in the retail space. So what do they have in common? And I might just ask you to not take some pictures at some of these slides just because we haven't published these results yet. Apology. But basically, so first, I'm aware, and I just saw the Climate Week goals, but often when we talk about sustainability, we remain limited on greenhouse gases emissions. But these 3 case studies, they have such a holistic view of sustainability, right? From equity, intended as equitable access for eaters and equitable condition for producers, to feminist values, to care, like care is actually present in their constitution, etc. So this is what sustainability could look like in a post-growth economy. It just goes way more beyond greenhouse gases emission. And the second part, probably most important, all of them are not-for-profit. And being not-for-profit is it's not just a status. It indicates that they try to reduce what I call financial extractivism. Because in the for-profit model or in the growth-driven economy, the goal is to create profit. And the only way to create profit is to externalize, either by exploiting more labor or externalizing ecological negative impacts. And I would invite you today, my first message is not to talk about externalities anymore, but to talk about systemic cost-shifting mechanisms. Because when we talk about externalities, then the literature and policymakers talk about market failures. No, these are not market failures. This is how the system is meant to work. So if we talk about externalities, the mainstream response is going to be we need market-based mechanisms to overcome the market failures, right? And we know the market-based mechanisms are not working or not working fast enough. But if we start talking about systemic cost-shifting mechanisms, then we can readdress the problem to policymakers, to changing the structure and the institutional framework in which our, in this case, food system operate. And again, there's just a quote from a participant in there. They chose to be not-for-profit because they didn't want profit-driven goals to compete with the social ecological goals. I define these, me and other many other scholars, these niches as shadow networks, which are networks that operate outside the dominant system, but they function as incubator of new practices. And these are really important because they keep alive the idea that, you know, a non-capitalist, non-growth-driven society can exist. And probably today we're going to hear about many other alternatives. So they bring a lot of social and technological innovation. And again, I might ask you not to take a picture of this, but I would really like you to remember this word. My research now is focusing more on ex-innovation. So when we look at innovation, social or technological, there's always this idea of adding new things to the systems, you know, more and more and more. And I think, and my research is indicating that all these kind of niches should reclaim more ex-innovation. Ex-innovation is the active, planned phase out of unsustainable elements, products, the entire paradigm, right? And I think that when we think about food systems, we don't actually know exactly what we want to phase out and how to do it in a fair way. And when we explore the governance of ex-innovation, there are two problems. One is that an IPCC reports, the sixth report, Chapter 17, shows that lobbies have a lot of lobbies like fossil fuel corporation have a stake in the system, so they will resist, you know, change. And that's a problem of implementing ex-innovation. Phasing out of unsustainable practice meets resistance from some stakeholders. The other way is when ex-innovation is not done fairly, it can create backlashes. And we can see in the recent protests in Europe of farmers, you know, backlashing against the Green New Deal, etc. And we can discuss it later. But it's because sometimes we just decide to phase out of a process or substance without thinking about the justice element linked to it. So I think that niches in Australia and elsewhere should reclaim more the ex-innovation side of transition. And then briefly, I'm looking at this from a cross-scale analysis. My other invite today as practitioner, and on my other hat, I'm also a practitioner, is that if we need to ex-innovate something, I think the most important thing we should push forward in Australia in the Russia discussion is to move beyond GDP. So GDP, the gross domestic product, measures the prosperity of our nation, and all our economic policies are geared toward aiming towards increasing GDP growth, right? But if you go to, you know, a community garden by bicycle and so on, you're not contributing as much to GDP as if you were driving your car to go to, you know, buy a product, and maybe on your way to the supermarket you might even have a car accident, because that increases GDP. So if you end in hospital and you need to repair your car, you also increase GDP. So we can see that, you know, how we measure prosperity in our society is not probably ideal. And this is not my opinion again, this is the UN Secretary General and many other scholars and politicians that recognize that we're destroying nature, but we are counting it as an increase in wealth. So there are discussions in Australia around well-being budget, well-being frameworks, and I think that food actors in Australia, based on what I'm exploring, are pretty much absent from this conversation. So my other invite would be that. And I will finish with a quote that would be much better than any of my writing of yours. He wrote how there's been a movement from food as nutrition and agricultural social integration to a situation in which agri-food operations are carried out primarily to circulate and accumulate capital. And I will just go to his call. He asked for to reinstate food as food, farmers as food producers, and market as a location tool. So basically shift away from food as commodity. And if you're interested in collaborating, working, chatting about any of these things, please check out my email and contact me. Thank you. Well, thank you, Sabrina, for putting these big words out there and hopefully open the minds of everyone. Because yeah, that's the fair transition we want to see happening. So yeah, we're gonna let the mic to Murat to talk us about what Ooooby is doing to kind of shift to that system.
Yeah, so I'm Murat. I've been running Regen Sydney for the past decade. I guess simply put, you can put it like you can call it an online farmers market. Though deeply, I'm really interested in organizational structure and creating a fair system within this unfair system we live in. And for the past decade, I've really been just experimenting internally with the structure, with people, and with the farmers we have, really figuring out what is fair, and for a long period probably also thinking that I know what is fair, but realizing that fair is a very subjective matter. And I think with everything that is going on, I'm sort of like in the process of redefining probably where we are and where we're standing with the whole crisis that's going on, the disposable income that doesn't exist anymore, businesses like us actually being in a complete different scenario where your ideals and what you need to do and want to do, it just doesn't work the way I thought it did 10 years ago. So in short, that's basically where I'm at, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the details as we go.
Thanks, Murat.
Thank you. But do you want to maybe, do you have examples of farmers you worked with, and have you seen any challenges with climate-related impacts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, look, in terms of regenerative agriculture, my perspective of what I see in the public is, and the way it's communicated, I'm confused about it sometimes, and I think everyone has a different perception to it. I mean, generally speaking, we're talking about regenerating the landscape, but where this has all started, it's coming from a grazing perspective. It's coming from an animal farming perspective. And farming is different. Broadacre farming is very different to vegetable and orchards and European plants and perennial plants, and it's not the same. So there's certain difficulties that lie in what it actually means to be regenerative in a particular specific space. And I think we're figuring that out. And then you talked about not putting chemicals into the earth. And then there's the perspective, I guess, from the conventional side, that there's also regenerative farming on the conventional side, but you do put chemicals in the earth. So I think there's a lot of nuance to the issue that isn't actually being talked about and not presented to the public, which I have personally difficulty with. When it comes to farmers, we work only with farmers who work on organic principles. Not everyone is certified, like Pocket City Farms isn't, but we know them and we know what they do. So there's a personal relationship there. And the truth to the matter is that, an organic farm can be regenerative, but it doesn't mean that an organic farm is regenerative. And yeah, it's just, I guess there's big language and there's so much nuance to it that makes everything a little confusing. And when it comes to the climate, everything is really difficult. It's intense. I mean, you see the rain. And for the past, 3 years? And that has affected people a lot. It brings the morale down. People are disappointed. People are leaving their jobs. People can't afford to farm. That is the reality. And yeah, I don't know how to solve this, but in terms of it just needs communication. I think everyone, consumers, need to understand how everything affects. When you have rain for 4 or 5 weeks, you're going to realize that the produce you get is probably not going to be as good as it is when it's just shiny. It's like if you put your fingers into water for 2 hours, how do they look? And yeah, so yeah, in general. That's cool.
Thank you.
Everyone looks a tiny bit cold, so I'm just going to play a quick game. Stand up if you've been to Pocket City Farms before. Now just like move heaps to warm yourself up. All right. Thanks, legends. Sit back down. Now stand up if you haven't been to Pocket City Farms before and this is your first time. You can also move around. Thank you very much. That's great. That gives me an idea of who's in the room. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview, my elevator pitch, if you will, of what Pocket City Farms is for the benefit of people who haven't been here before, and possibly for some people who have been here but haven't got the full spiel. Big shout out to Emma and Zag, our founders, who wanted to showcase more urban agriculture in Sydney, and they found themselves thinking about a rooftop farm, because where would you find ground level land in Sydney? And yet here it was, the old discarded Camperdown Bowling Club. Once the hub of the community, many bowls clubs had reinvented themselves, this one had not. And so amazing to find this ground level land, lots of hard work. I can't tell you how much work goes into an urban farm startup, particularly this one, which was, really created by the community for the community. There was a crowdfunding campaign that, came up with the money to get those first seeds in the ground, to get the farm up and running, to get the trees out in the food forest that's out on the verge. And Pocket City Farms has always stood for three things, and we call those our three pillars. And I was thinking about it today and thinking, that's a bit stupid. Probably should call it our three different fruit trees. Anyway, our three pillars are education, community, and fair food. And when I talk about fair food, really interested in what Murat's saying about regeneratively grown food. We want to promote food here that people can come and see, taste, touch, get involved in growing and learn about. That's really good for the people who grow it, good for farmers, that pays them a fair wage so they can afford to live in the city and still farm. We also want them to not have to douse it all with chemicals, so we're not certified organic, but we do follow organic practices, and we're starting increasingly to follow more and more regenerative practices. And for us, what that looks like in the city is leaving the land in a better condition than we found it, trying to practice crop rotation, trying to not just think about, we've got a market garden out there, but that we have a whole thriving ecosystem and we're wrapping that whole market garden in this blanket of biodiversity. And so you would have, a couple of you today, done your farm induction and said you're going to see things like wasps. We love wasps. Who knew they were such great pollinators? We love bees, we love all of these things, and so we want to encourage them. And if you want to know anything about any of them, go see Chris. Bug nerd up the back. Chris comes in almost every day, and occasionally when we're just mid-conversation and being like, a new bee that I've never seen. So yeah, we're really interested in encouraging that. We also want the food to be great for the people who eat it. So again, we don't douse it in chemicals, and we want to make it accessible for people. And that's really hard with organic food and food that's grown in this way. So any surplus we have goes out into our Honesty store, which is out on the street, and you can purchase it that way. We also sell online. And just recently we've launched an organic buyers group, which isn't really our thing. It's a group of the community who came together and said, hey, we want to start an organic buyers group. They get together once a week, except for today, just interestingly, because we didn't get enough people signing up, so come and see me after. They buy wholesale from a farm. They also buy from Pocket City Farms, and it's the least volunteering you'll ever do in your life. It's about 15 minutes, am I right? Everyone turns up, chuck out some washing baskets, divvy the food up, go home. Some people do a few other things online, but it's really simple volunteering, and you get about $80 worth of organic food for 45 bucks. Really comparable with supermarket prices of non-organic food. We also are super passionate about education. We have school students, thousands of them, who come through every year, and we get them out on the farm. They go on this amazing urban farm adventure. But we also, while we know children are the future, we need to train them up in all the ways of regenerative farming. We also know we've got a bit of an adult problem. So we run the same program, but for adults. And we call it a team retreat program. Really, it should be called composting corporate people's money. We love taking corporate people's money. They pay us to volunteer. We get to take them on a farm tour and teach them all about regenerative agriculture. And then they get to do a hands-on workshop and learn something about how to live more sustainably. And we get to learn stuff about what the kind of weird big end of town are thinking. And yesterday I was literally in a workshop where they gave us a lecture on the climate crisis. And this is going to start impacting business. And there's a few people in the room going, yes, I'm glad you caught up. So yeah, we're pretty excited to hear that that conversation is changing really fast as well. We're happy to take their money. If any of you work for a large corporate and have $500,000, we'd love it to start a new fund. Last we're really passionate about community, and what we're really, really excited about is this thing which in weird kind of government corporate speak is called a third place. Has anyone heard of that term before? A third place is a place where you go to hang out with people that's not your work or your home. But it's also a place where you don't have to go and spend money. So you can just hang out and be with other people. And we do that here on Thursday mornings and Saturday mornings with our volunteering sessions. We have a job for everybody. We also run these beautiful Thursday evening sessions during daylight savings where we get out on the farm, there's a job for everyone, and then we have a community meal after. And there's a team of people over there right now cooking us the best meal you'll ever eat. Give them a huge shout out. Thank you, Chef. And they literally volunteer to come and turn this beautiful food that we grow into beautiful food that we can eat. And so I kind of feel like of all the people who work hard on site, they're kind of the magicians. Like, yeah, Chris, you do a good job growing the food, but they turn it into something everyone wants to eat and everyone can connect over food. And it's a real beautiful level and it brings people together. So that's what we stand for. Lastly, I'll probably talk too long, but we're looking at the moment to put the S in Pocket City Farms. It always had an S on the end. And the idea was like, maybe we could kind of help other people to do this everywhere. Maybe other people don't have to make all the dumb mistakes that we've made here, or that like a whole bunch of us have made at other different farms. And so what we're looking to do now is literally raise $500,000. Hit me up if you've got it, or if you know someone. And we want to start a new site somewhere else. But in starting that new site, we're looking to create an urban farm toolkit. There's going to be lots of different models for urban farming. There's going to be everything we've learned. And you know what? All the boring stuff. I don't want anyone to have to walk into a place like this and write a work health and safety policy again. You can have mine. We really want to like, sorry?
It's not written when
it wasn't written when I came, no. I've been here for 3 years. You know, and we want organisations to be able to punch in and collect really good stats and be able to get communities upscale to do this stuff really fast. So that's why I'm part of Pocket City Farms. That's what I'm really passionate about, and it's what we're looking to do next. And lastly, I'll end on saying, did anyone read The Guardian's summary of what climate scientists think is going to happen? You know, the degrees that we might get to? Did anyone feel a little bit like a balloon that had been at the end of a party? Deflated there, like maybe like, oh, we're not going to get there. It's a really hard space. So talking at an event about climate action, we're in this really interesting point where the problem is a solution. All the problems that we've got, we can solve and create a way better world. Get amongst the donut over there, have a look that Regen Sydney have put together. Some of this stuff is a really exciting time to be alive. We're all part of different generations, but we get to be part of this huge regeneration. So really excited to be sharing that with everyone and to have had all the people here helping us out today. And let's make climate action more of a fun party.
Thank you. Yeah, fun and delicious. Okay, over to you, Dave.
Totally. I do have a presentation, whether that was in order or not. Murat, so interesting, like the nuances of it all. It's totally true. There's just so many different ways, and you could go and so many different effects of it all. So I'm really intrigued just from hearing all of these different perspectives to know where could we go with conversations. I feel like that regenerative kind of strategy or regenerative topic at the moment is, I think, where we come in is, and perhaps Pocket City Farms and other farmers potentially have this role as well, is regenerating the attitude of farming as well. And I feel like this is a potential thing I'd love to be more focused on. We're actually now hearing a bit more of a topic about it. But in essence, hello everyone, I'm David. I run Feedback Organic, which is, soon you'll hear a bit more about it now. I'm a 5th generation farmer. I think I'm coining the phrase for a 1st generation circular economy based urban agricultural farmer. And hopefully by what we're doing and what we're all doing is creating a new generation, one that's potentially growing food's future together. And I think, yeah, if we just go next slide, that's great. I just want to touch on, I obviously run Feedback Organic, but more recently in the last year or so, we've been starting to work with SWAMP, which is a Sustainable Wetlands Agricultural Makers project from the Central Coast. At the back, Sue and Cass here is helping out. They've come today. And importantly as well, we're working with ARC, which is an amazing organisation on the Central Coast who are actually breaking down food waste with black soldier fly larvae on a commercial scale, which is so cool. And I absolutely advise everyone to go check it out because it's you can quite literally get your hands in some larvae, which is a fascinating experience for everyone. But I'm only just touching on that because it's a collaborative approach, which we are totally up for. And what we do is on the next slide, and why we exist as well. This is essentially why we exist, I think, because of the behaviour and the connection to our food system, which has disappeared. And this is this convenience which is in front of us. And I think why we're existing is to actually get around this. Like, if you can ask, I think we've got a very converted audience here that you probably all have grown and eaten your own food. But if you go to another audience, you can probably ask, you know, have you ever grown or eaten your own food? And it's like very, just heard crickets at that same point. I think that's exactly that was perfect. You'll hear crickets, and it's fascinating because it's true. We need to reconnect and perhaps regenerate our attitude towards our food systems and the value of them as well. I think the next slide will be great as well. And I think that we've all probably seen facts like this around that basically a third of all waste going to landfill is food waste, which is crazy. My background is hospitality and business, and you know, coming from a farming background, I saw an opportunity to use all that food waste on our farm up near Gringai country, which is near Barrington Tops. And this is, yeah, my background has led me to create the next slide, which is essentially what we're creating is Feedback Organic is creating community-inclusive circular food systems that scale. And that is, yeah, just a whole collaborative project with so many different organisations and people. And you know, I think all playing different roles with different parts at different times. But essentially, the whole point of this is, and how it works, thank you, is that we recover food waste from anywhere. Restaurants, cafes, schools, large corporates, definitely trying to dig into their pockets at some point soon. I like that. Converting it into compost or perhaps flax soldier fly frass as well, which is the fertiliser which is produced as an output of that. We grow them, we use that compost in urban farms that we've established, and continue to work with other organisations who do that as well. And the biggest part is to engage the community, which is exactly what's happening here with Pocket City Farms. I think this urban footprint is what it's about, like how we get that opportunity to reconnect us, you, everyone, people who are actually not even familiar with our food systems at all, to actually come to places like this and eat the local produce, and then just influence that behaviour to repeat that. Go to the next slide. This is essentially what I've done over the last, since about 2013 or so, where we were predominantly more based around Newcastle and the Hunter. Sue and Cass are operating swamp on the Central Coast. I've frequently tried to get up there as frequently as I can to help with setting up maybe a larger set of farm there itself, but they're doing a bang-up job themselves. But essentially, it's all about just how we're providing as much access as possible to farming in an urban environment. I'll move on to the next slide. Thanks, Mike. Over the last couple of years, yeah, I think for this Climate Week as well, I think what we're focusing on is a couple of different SDGs, from sustainable communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, obviously, and I think what Jacqui was touching on as well is these partnerships for the goals about. I think I've actually physically only just moved to Sydney in the last year or so, and so our approach has absolutely changed to thinking about how can we engage Sydney metropolitan stakeholders, and how can we engage what we're trying to do in the next target is how can we engage 15 key stakeholders who actually make up a great cross-section of our food system, and potentially who can actually have a larger impact from kind of their physical footprint in Sydney and how they can influence our food system. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. I might move on to the next slide if that's okay. These are a couple of different farms we've operated. Basically, the largest on the left there was just half the size of a soccer field. That's basically an acre. We were processing 5 tonnes of food waste each week on that farm on the left there as well. Super primitive model, but now we partner with other organisations like ARC and also Remondis, who do the collection for us as well, and then provide us with the organic compost at the end of it, and we apply it to the beds. Let's move on. Thank you. These are some of the 1 hour farmers who have started with us as volunteers. Ultimately, then we ended up employing them, and ultimately they then created their own organisations from that, which is, I think, like the essence of what we're trying to do. I think. Thanks. Brilliant. Dave had come to the farm as well in Newcastle, and I think it's just about trying to provide access to people who perhaps didn't even know that it was of interest to them. And Matt, James, and Lauren that was a great example for them. They were trying to farm in their backyard. Gave them an opportunity. Now they've created their own farms from that. So what we have since done and converted into as a base from this outcome as well. Just to the next slide. Oh, these are just some of the partners we've worked with and working with currently. We'll probably just skip over to the next one as well. Oh, actually, just if anyone's interested, this is our commercial model. This is how it actually works as well. So we get a great revenue stream from our commercial food waste collection, our produce sales, or this as well. This was actually probably about 2 years ago when we had more farms operating as well. I've tried to strategize to think about how we can do this differently, and this is why we've actually moved into the non-profit world. And this is just a framework of how we were doing it about 2 years ago, and I think the key for everyone is actually just to try and start somewhere. If you're interested in anything like this, I think you just got to try and give it a go. We'll move on to the next one. This is where there's a couple of the different programs we've been putting together with different stakeholders across Sydney and just Newcastle and just the Central Coast as well, where Swamp and ARC are a part of this fantastic program as well, where we basically bring people from here, potentially organisations who we want to partner with, for a number of different reasons around gaining expertise from their essentially their kind of sustainable development lens, but also absolutely a financial lens as well, and trying to get partnerships from that. But how that looks is just actually bringing people to a farm, bringing them to the actual the closed loop of our food waste into food system as well. And I think it's those little excursions, so to speak, where you can actually get a couple of different a totally different perspective from their perspective to see how they can actually play a role in it as well. Ultimately, this is what we're trying to do. I think what we've decided to do to take a break in the last couple of years is to focus our energies on creating a centre of excellence, to be able to basically create cohort after cohort of people who probably have the same journey as James, Matt and Lauren, who started with volunteers, who then see, actually, this is a fantastically viable career or future for themselves. We want to be able to, what we want to do as the non-profit is to be able to create a centre of excellence. Even just spot like this is such a great example to expose people to these new food system sort of things that we're putting together. Use a place like this in conjunction with tertiary education. I've just recently done a study through social change and an MBA of social impact, and I think just touching on that, because I feel like people not only just need to learn how to farm, if we're trying to actually understand and work within society, we need to actually understand how the society works. And I think for me, that was a journey for myself, and I just want to replicate that for however many people we can actually get that replicated as many times as possible. So a big part of that is funding Centre of Excellence, funding their fellowship to put them through that Centre of Excellence, and then funding them to set up somewhere else wherever they can. Ideally, there is so much more nuance to that as well, and it's very detailed graph or chart there, but happily talk further about that, about how that's happening. And the last thing I want to talk about is actually just getting, we'll just move on to the next slide, thank you, is essentially just getting, I've been to so many climate events this week, or a number of them this week, and it's absolutely a huge call out for the youth side of things. And I think it's, I felt like I was once young, and I feel like this is really interesting to now realise that I'm no longer that. And so I was like, I think I have a mentality of an 8-year-old, but I feel like what we're trying to do now is actually reach out and say, if there's anyone interested out there who would like to join, have like an element of a working group or a committee to do with what we're a part of, who perhaps wants to represent a youthful side of urban ag or circular economy based urban ag, have a look at this. We're keen to promote that as much as possible, and I think that's it. It's just that's where obviously that's the next generation. That's where we need to support, and we just need to expose them to as many of these opportunities as possible. And that's it. Thanks, Guru. Cheers.
Thanks, Dave. Jacqui, Murat, Sabrina, Eileen. I'm Madison. I'm here from Young Farmers Connect. We've been working the last 12 months to re-establish the organisation. We had a bit of a pause after the floods in the Northern Rivers wiped out our team, basically. And we've been doing a lot of work on our both governance and strategy. So I don't have a very well prepared pitch for you, as these beautiful people have greatly demonstrated. So I'm going to have some notes. If I blank, someone asks me a question, but I am really passionate about what we do, so I'm always keen to talk more about it. So Young Farmers Connect we're a national network for young, new and aspiring farmers. Obviously it sounds pretty specific to young people, which is where we have started, but our full purpose is to regenerate landscapes by empowering new, young and aspiring farmers. You might be a new farmer, but in your 50s, you're still part of our network. And actually, if you're under 65 in Australia, you are young for being a farmer. I'm not sure about what the stat looks like for urban ag. It's probably a bit different. But so that's sort of our main purpose. We have a vision of thriving communities, regenerated landscapes, and businesses that are viable. And I really like, Sabrina, what you said when we were talking about beyond GDP and degrowth, because so much of what we do at the moment is still in that preparation for change space. We need farmers to be able to be viable in the current system, but we also need communities to gather around those farmers as systems change as well. And a lot of the farms in our networks are small scale, and the kinds of community that they're able to build in their operations, I think, is really essential to that escalation of degrowth. Does that work? That's not the right sentence, but that's what was in my head. So let me just have a quick look at my notes, guys. So one of the big things is, if you're entering a career in agriculture, it needs to be a viable one. We don't want people to continue to be making the same mistakes that often new or first-gen farmers do make. Myself, I've made them all myself. Most of us on the committee for young farmers also have. And in my 20s, I was farming most of the time. I worked on poultry, pastured poultry, mixed farms, goat dairy, vegetables. Worked here in education for a little while. And what I've seen in this space is so much heart, but not enough systems around people, around young people and around new farmers to actually support them to keep going beyond, say, the 5-year mark. We want to support farmers as a whole across Australia. We do that through, we have chapters, regional chapters. So there's a Greater Sydney chapter that includes Blue Mountains and Greater Sydney. We had a meet-up just a few weeks ago here at Pocket City, which was great, with a bunch of representatives from local land services as well, which was the first time we've seen a government organisation support an event with no outcomes. It literally was a social event. So we hadn't met up, I think, in the Greater Sydney chapter capacity for 3 or 4 years, and we just wanted to reconnect to hear what people were doing in the small-scale food space. So I'm not sure if I've articulated, but what we've seen, I think, so Young Farmers Connect has been running for about 8 years across a bunch of different chapters in Australia, and where we constantly keep coming back to is that what we represent is both young people but also small-scale farmers. So large-scale farms have a voice in the country. They have unions, they have industry lobbies, and a lot more capital behind them to speak to power. Small-scale farms don't have that, and it can be that what we're seeing in anecdotal research that we've done, and now we're running a national survey that's going to contribute more, like a bigger data set, is that although some small-scale farms that earn under a certain amount are not really considered as useful to the economy, useful to the amount of food we produce and eat in Australia, particularly because food is seen as a commodity in Australia. The farmers that we represent and work with generally don't see food as a commodity either. We see food as a community resource and a health resource. And so, is that still working? And so we, I just lost my train of thought. Commodity, food, commodity. Yeah. And so if we don't value food unless it's being commodified, then we're losing quite a lot of farmers. even just in New South Wales, there are 10,000 at least or more, a bit more than 10,000 farms that earn under 150 grand a year. They are managing an enormous amount of land collectively. But because they've been subdivided, which is what happens on the East Coast, we parcel up large blocks, what used to be large blocks of land, to smaller spaces. Obviously, some of those are hobby, lifestyle arrangements, but a lot of them are also providing opportunities for people to have small-scale farms and generally feed their community. They're maybe selling at the local IGA, some kind of larger end of the small scale they could sell to the bigger supermarkets as well. That is a lot of land and potential for landscape regeneration on a massive scale, and what we want to see is government recognising that in order to make changes to policy as well. So a lot of farmers in our network were not able to access any support when there was natural disasters because they're sort of not considered a commodified agriculture, a commodity agricultural enterprise. So that's sort of a big part of our work. And we're running a survey at the moment. So hands up if anyone here is a farmer. I see, we got a couple. Sweet. I'm sure that you guys have all done the survey, I think, because I know all of your faces. Is anyone here wanting to be a farmer? Yeah, awesome. So the survey is also for you. It's for aspiring farmers too, because there are challenges of getting into the industry. And so we're looking to survey new, aspiring and experienced farmers as well. We have got some data back from that. It is really interesting of who's responding. The first lot of people to respond were not young. They were all 50 and above. And they were that cohort really understands the need for good data to make these regenerative systems happen, because we need to be able to show that they matter to the future of Australia's food systems. And if we can't, it's all anecdotal. And data really does matter. Yeah, that's probably spoken for long enough. I was going to touch on the regenerative issue. And I guess there's definitely an issue there of branding or potentially greenwashing. I think I'm so glad we've moved beyond the word sustainable. We're talking about regenerative. That's a more systemic approach. And where I think we can continue to go and where groups like Regen Sydney can go is we're not just looking at practices, ecological practices on a farm. We're looking at that whole system. So justice is a part of climate action. And without justice in the climate space and in the food space, we're just full steaming ahead with similar kind of colonial practices that we've done in the past. We're leaving behind wealth of knowledge and culture that that has a lot of the solutions to the ecological crisis that we're in. So really stoked to hear in your presentation, Sabrina, about prioritising degrowth and finding those solutions with a justice aspect too. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I hope this panel nourished you before getting real food in your belly. I just feel like we've traveled to a world that we want to see happening, but the good thing is that those initiatives are happening. They're out there, there are people backing them up, but for them to become mainstream, we need radical collaboration and collective ambition to grow those initiatives and to connect them to the network we're part of. And so if we look at, I don't know how many of you had a chance to do a bit of the activities there, like of trying to think about, in the last few weeks, where did you get your food from? And I think looking back at there, and I invite you to do it after if you didn't have a chance to do it before, most of us in the city are still getting our food from big supermarkets and sometimes like independent retailer. But the reality is that if we don't know where the initiatives for getting organic, locally grown food are, we're less likely to engage and support those initiatives because we just think that this is the way it is. But what we need to have is more and more people questioning that system and be like, you know what, I'm going to take the responsibility of engaging with what is happening in my city and get to know who is producing food where I live, how can I support them. So yeah, we encourage you to complete this activity because then that's going to help us as well communicate about this service a bit more. But we also wanted to take the opportunity to introduce what is Regen Sydney, and a big thank you to Kiran, who has been one of the key persons behind Regen Sydney. And I think we've got Pete online as well. He's dialing in from Europe. But yeah, Regen Sydney started just after the bushfire and just before the COVID lockdown with the guiding question of what does good look like for Sydney and how do we live on this land with joy? And using those guiding questions, we built up a coalition of individual and organization that are focusing on the three pillar vision. The first one is to transition to an economy that heals and activates rather than degenerate life, and show that it's not only possible, but it's already underway in Sydney. Then we want to connect and grow the movement of individuals and organizations that are working towards making Sydney a resilient and regenerative city. And finally, we want to get Sydney inside the donut, which is the safe space for life within a generation. So when we talk about regenerative farming or regeneration at all, indeed there is a big risk of this new term being used by, especially by corporates, as a new fancy word for sustainability. But what we mean with regeneration is to create more life. How do we base what we do on life systems? And how do we create more life around life? By bringing people together, regenerating our soil, creating just new social systems that can help us to transition to this post-growth world. So last year, after doing some community engagement and stakeholders roundtable and analyzing I don't know how many pages of and recording of those sessions, we came up with a version of the donut economics, which is the Sydney donut. So I don't know if you're new to donut economics, but that's the compass we've been using with Regen Sydney to guide our work. So you have an outer ceiling, which is the planetary boundaries that we need to respect if we don't want to overshoot our ecological capacity. But then you also need social foundation that you want to meet if you want everyone to thrive. So those indicators are a bit different than the one that are from the European model and are a bit more representative of what we want to achieve in Sydney. So we invite you to explore that, and there is a QR code over there if you want to have a look. And thank you to one of our amazing designers, Josie Ford, who created this beautiful framework. But that's also one thing of regeneration that is important to us. It needs to be beautiful. Like if we want people to be inspired by that, they need to see beauty. They need to have something that resonates with their heart in the first place. So these donuts, the goal is to localize it to each different neighborhood in Sydney and to create local indicators of thriving. So, and when it comes to food, it's one indicator of the social foundation, but the reality is that food connects to all of the other dimensions. The way we produce the food, the way we transport the food, the way we eat, the way we dispose of food, is all connected to all of these indicators, and if not well managed, those interconnections can degrade the system, and that's currently where we are. So our mission for the next few years is to first do some neighborhood activation. So as I said, we have the donuts. We want to localize it and make it visible at the neighborhood scale. Sydney has this amazing shape of villages, and each suburb has a different identity. So we don't think that the donuts will talk the same way to different neighborhoods. And we're starting this work with Waverley in August this year, and we're hoping that we can replicate that across different suburbs. Then we have the Living Lab. So the Living Lab is to make the donuts accountable. So how can we create a portrait of Greater Sydney and show where we are at on this different dimension? Where are we overshooting our capacity and where are we doing great so that we can redirect our energy in a better way. And then we have city-scale pilots. So the goal is to create some connected and funded cluster of initiatives that shift Sydney into the safe and just space for all life. So food system could be one of the city-scale pilots. a swimmable river could be another one, or a swimmable basin in Sydney. So we are hoping to develop this connected pilots in the next years. So when it comes to regrowing our food system, with today we wanted to frame float the idea of a regenerative food system, but also start framing what does it look like, and how could Regen Sydney play a role amongst all these amazing initiatives in bringing this cross-sector collaboration and breaking the silo that are preventing us from making these initiatives go mainstream. So we wanted to think about how would Sydney look like if you could get your food grown locally? How would it look like for you to know where your eggs are being produced, knowing that there is no chemical being applied on your food? But also, how would it look like if food is reconsidered as a public infrastructure, such as roads, some public schools, and not something that is being locked into giant supermarkets and corporates? So yeah, we really invite you to keep this big question in your mind. Share with other participants during the dinner, and we invite you to connect with Regen Sydney if you're interested in joining this new working group, so that we can keep this question going and start framing what can we do. So we would like people in the food production space, but also the commercial producer. They need to be part of the conversation because they're going to be impacted as well, and they may be the one preventing that from happening. So how do we engage them as well? Regen Sydney also welcome ideas on how to get funded. We are an amazing team of dedicated volunteers, and we need more of this positive marriage to join us. But the reality is that this job cannot continue to be only volunteer-led if, again, we want it to be part of this post-growth society. So if you have any idea on how to get some funding, organization to contact, let us know as well. But yeah, I don't want to delay you joining the food party because I think some of you came for delicious food. So I will leave you with this quote from Fritjof Capra. All living beings are members of ecological communities bound together in a network of interdependencies. When this deep ecological perception becomes part of your daily awareness, a radically new system of ethic emerges. So yeah, thank you everyone. And the last shout out that we haven't made so far is for Grumpy Donuts. So Grumpy Donuts is a local donuts producer, vegan as well, and they kindly offered us a lot of their donuts that they didn't sell today. So you're gonna have hundreds of donuts to eat tonight. And it's linked to donut economy. So yeah, make sure that if you like them, that you go and support them. Yeah, something for the nut. But yeah, thank you for coming and for supporting all this work.